Well, I mean, like the fun part about Elseworlds in a way that was like different than What If is that you could totally change the stakes. It wasn't just like one thing is different and thus everything falls from there. And like, you know, What If the fun was the domino, like saying like, all right, well, this occurs. And then because of that, like butterfly wing, like where do we get to the hurricane? Everyone, welcome back to the Men of Steel podcast. I'm Casey Aiken, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Jmike Olsen.
Welcome back, everybody. Glad to have you.
And returning, although this is the first time these two have crossed over, we've got Jonah Gregory from the Inks and Issues podcast.
Hello. Happy to be back, and it's cool that, you know, Jmike's here this time.
I finally get to meet you.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was scheduling issues when we had our panel together at GeeklyCon. Well, that was 2020, wasn't it? Oh, God.
No. 2020 was canceled, too.
Oh, no, but it was the digital one.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
Yeah, because they didn't do a digital last year.
No, they didn't. Yes, exactly. I was like, wait, I didn't. That was a long time ago at this point. 2019 would have been.
Yeah, 2019 is where we met, I want to say.
Yes. These last few years, there certainly have happened. Am I right, guys?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So for listeners who don't go that far back to the worst year ever, maybe. Jonas, talk a little bit about yourself, about your podcast, etc.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm a writer and I've done indie comics way in the past when I was in my early 20s. And then I wanted to start talking comics again. So I just started a podcast with my friend Kieran, and we do like a book club style where we go pick like a story arc or a first volume of, you know, a new series. Well, not new, a series. We're not picky about if it's new or not, because like being current in comics is tough these days. So what we do is go, hey, this looks interesting. Or if we have a guest, we go, what do you feel like talking about? And just we make them do the hard work, which is picking what we're actually going to review. And they're always like, whatever you guys want. We're like, this is not how this works. No, we're much nicer about it than that. But yeah, so basically we just do like a book club where we go through and go through like all the story beats and discuss kind of issue to issue. And we've been on a hiatus because last year was just also crazy. So we're working on bringing it back this year as well. And we're going to be covering Spider-Verse, which is a pretty beefy volume. So we're actually going to break it up into like shorter, like instead of covering like 4 to 6 issues per episode, we're going to try and like keep it to like 3-ish so that people can kind of read along with us easier. Because we know people are busy, but we would love to have more, you know, audience interaction. Because if we say, hey, we're reading 1 through 3 today, then, or for this week, then people can actually have time to like read it and let us know what their thoughts were. So that's kind of where we're headed with the podcast this year. So,
well, it's always a fun listen. Like you said, you've been on hiatus, but I really enjoyed a lot of the episodes I've listened to. I have avoided some of the ones where I didn't want to be spoiled on things.
That is totally fair, because we definitely spoil everything because it's a book club. Yeah. So
well, exactly.
we assume you either have read it or don't care if you get spoiled. Right,
which is kind of how we go here, because guys, spoilers for today's episode on the comic that we're talking about. But that's just also a standing we're always be spoiling.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep, we definitely didn't want to have to tiptoe around like big plot stuff, because that's kind of the fun of doing it as a book club. It's like with the assumption people have read it, then you can just talk about the twists and turns as in depth as you would like. So that's why we decided to go that route.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's always a fun show. People should totally check out the backlog, and I can't wait for the next episode to drop.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to get back into it.
But today we are not here to talk about other people's podcasts. Today we're here to talk about a comic from the 90s. And boy, does it feel like a comic from the 90s.
Yeah.
Yep. For some reason, I thought it was newer. I don't know why. And then when I started reading it, I was like, oh, man, this is not modern at all.
As soon as there are a few scenes that flat out they would not be allowed to do after 2001. Like, just would not get away with it. So, yeah, today we're talking about 1998's JLA The Nail. which is an Alan Davis joint. He wrote and penciled this book. And I think that's the best part about this book, just flat out. Alan Davis is an amazing artist in general. And just every page, the visuals are just great.
So good.
Yeah, for sure.
But did either of you read this before? Or,
no.
I had heard of it, but like I said, I thought it was a more recent thing for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe you had mentioned it elsewhere, and I don't know, because for some reason I was just like, oh yeah, I think that's like a more modern, like Elseworlds-y type story, and not realizing it was from like the late 90s. But no, I didn't. I have not read a lot of Elseworlds stuff, but the few I've read have always been kind of wild, so they're always like entertaining in their own weird ways.
Well, I mean, like the fun part about Elseworlds in a way that was like different than What If is that you could totally change the stakes. It wasn't just like one thing is different and thus everything falls from there. And like, What If the fun was the domino, like seeing like, all right, well, this occurs. And then because of that, like butterfly wing, like where do we get to the hurricane? Part? Or what happens if the butterfly doesn't flap, and how do we get to the hurricane?
Yes.
And that was generally the idea for like What If, and Elseworlds usually were like, oh, we can do a lot more big changes kind of thing, in a little more prestige format. But usually, even though they were like What If was issue to issue, Elseworlds could sometimes be in multiple issues in a volume like what we're looking at today, or sometimes it'd be just like one thicker thing. Like there was like one year where every annual was an Elseworlds for all the books, and generally speaking, they were unconnected in all regards. But the Elseworlds that had sequels oftentimes were kind of funky when they got there, because usually the idea was going into the first one. And it's fun that, Jonah, you're here for this one, because last time we talked about Superman, Batman Generations with you.
That's right.
And this time we're talking about JLA the Nail. And these are two of the only ones I can think of. I mean, there's like, I'm racking my brain at the moment. I'm sure there's others, but that actually got like proper sequel series. And in both cases, they're real weird.
Yeah. Well, the one we covered was what was it called? It was a Superman one, but it was like everyone's dead and the world's all gone to hell. And there's two Hitlers by the end of the story.
But
I cannot remember the title though. But
is that At World's End?
Yes, I believe so. But it is a sequel to one that has a character I don't know if I've ever heard of as the main character. So we skipped right to the Superman story within that, and that was certainly a choice we made. It is a very fun episode though, because that comic is just wild.
Yeah, that's where they the meme that was going around in like Channel Awesome videos back in the day were like, of course, don't you know anything about science?
Yes. Yeah, and the key to the solution to all and cause of all our problems was giant Gatling gun that's so big it has like an actual car engine with like a serpentine belt connecting all the guns together. And Superman has
every time they try to put Superman with guns, it's like,
right?
This seems wrong.
Yep, exactly. And
I can't put my finger on why, but this seems wrong.
Also, Batman's like the mansion had more of like the museum of villain stuff in it a little bit, and he somehow had the gun that shot his parents in that, like when they're going through the museum section of Wayne Manor.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that in the context of an Alan Davis project, because Alan Davis did Batman Year 2, the infamously bad sequel to Batman Year 1.
Interesting.
I think there's some charm to it, but it was the best thing about it was that it was the inspiration for Batman Mask of the Phantasm.
Oh, okay.
Oh, really?
So like that pedigree part is good, but there's this whole weird element where in it, Batman has to team up with Joe Chill, the man who murdered his parents, to hunt down this even worse killer. And while to do so, he arms himself with the gun that Joe Chill used to murder his parents.
Okay, so I have to review this at some point, is what you're telling me.
Man, comics are so weird. It's so weird.
Nothing in that sentence makes sense.
Yeah. But unlike Generations, where it's just like, all right, well, let's just get weird on all the timeline stuff and have Superman groom Lana Lang. Which was alluded to by some people in the chat when we did that one. JLA the Nail has a weird sequel that gets into like fourth worldy kind of stuff, and it gets real galaxy brained at the end. But the Nail has a really simple premise, and it's actually like those What Ifs, where it's like, all right, well, what's the one change? Like literally, the title "The Nail" is in reference to. I mean, it's in reference to this, like, I guess, poem, you would say. For one of a nail, the shoe was lost. For one of a shoe, the horse was lost. For one of a horse, the knight was lost. For one of a knight, the battle was lost. So it was a kingdom was lost, all for one of a nail, is the impetus for it.
And honestly, great intro for this. Like, that actually was like the perfect setup for this. Like, it makes you 100% understand what they're going for just by opening with that little poem.
Yeah. And you get this like chaos theory kind of idea going from it. And then you find the Kents have a nail in their tire. And so they can't be driving into town when Superman's rocket crash lands. So Superman's not here.
Yeah. Also, they were very frisky in that early panel.
Yep.
And again, consistent with this man's work, I have to say.
Yeah, I screen capped that the Martha Wayne being, or no, why did I say that name?
Oh no!
I screen capped the Martha Kent being like, "It's okay, Jonathan. I wanted to stay in anyway." It's like, ooh, Martha Kent, you're. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, they're young.
Yeah,
it makes
they're
sense,
young and in love. I mean, come on, it's fine.
Yeah, but still.
Still hilarious to me, though.
You've never seen that side of that before.
That you're just like, wow, the entire world's about to go to shit because you two got it on. Okay, well, that's...
Like, I love the idea that maybe in both timelines, the nail was always there. It's just in one timeline, Martha didn't stop Jonathan from fixing the wheel.
Exactly, yeah.
So as a result of them not going into town, we end up in a situation where Superman is not, or rather, Kal-El is not recovered by the Kents.
Nope.
And so we go into the DC era, which we'll talk about in a second, whatever this DC world that Alan Davis is presenting, as if Superman never showed up. And Lex Luthor is mayor of Metropolis, which was honestly aiming kind of low for where he'd eventually go.
Okay, yeah, I thought so too. Okay, I wasn't alone in that.
We hadn't had President Lex yet. So.
No,
true.
But like as soon as I saw that first spread of like the flags and the balloons and like Mayor Lex, I automatically got like Public Enemies vibes right off the back.
Yeah,
and I was like, oh, where is this going? It's automatically
kind of similar directions, frankly.
Yeah.
So Lex Luthor is now mayor. Metropolis has become kind of a totalitarian state. The Justice League still exists. Perry White is now kind of, I guess I would say like a Bill O'Reilly type at this point.
I was going to say J. Jonah Jameson.
Yeah, he was very J. Jonah Jameson.
Yes, but specifically, he's a newsman trying to stir up shit. Basically, I mean, like the he precedes the Alex Joneses is the thing. Or
yes, very in that vein though.
Yeah, or like a Hannity kind of character.
Yeah,
I mean, regardless, like
let's say era-wise, maybe like a Rush Limbaugh would be an influence as well.
Yeah. That's a good comparison right there. We find out that Jimmy Olsen is the deputy mayor. We get like a bit of a history where this is a post-crisis Earth where the JSA existed in World War II times, and then we've got a JLA today that has no Superman, and people don't really trust them. Some of them they seem to like Wonder Woman or the Atom, but others are like, I don't know about this creepy alien Martian Manhunter, and what the fuck is Batman?
Yes, I did
that
like
happens
that
all the time, though.
Yeah, nobody knows what he is, if he has powers.
He's like
is he a demon? Is he an alien? Who knows?
I mean, this is the DCU. You could be any of those things or a combination.
Yeah. And so issue 1 kind of deals with the JLA trying to figure out like their PR crisis at the moment. And while we get allusions to shit's going down behind the scenes that no one wants to talk about.
Yeah.
Lois Lane comes in to sort of like help like investigate some of the state of things. But then the big thing is that the Joker shows up again, having gotten free and being gifted with technology that like, did you guys recognize the gauntlets when you saw them?
No, I did not.
Where are they from?
This like the gauntlets are just like super Kryptonian looking, but of the specific 90s style Kryptonian, like the post Man of Steel comic look for the characters. So it's got like that like weird wavy kind of fabric thing, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And then like the way the fingers look, it looks very much like the designs that like Jor-El had in Man of Steel or like Superman had when he was possessed by the Eradicator. So it's like that kind of style going on there. So like, for me reading it at the time, I was like, "It's Kryptonian guns." Like,
okay,
that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I didn't pick up on that at first.
Yeah, which makes it. I think this actually works better as a comic now than it did at the time, because that mystery remains in that regard.
Yeah.
which it didn't then. Because, again, it was like, oh, yeah, it's what it all looks like.
Right.
But you also had the whole thing with, like, I almost said Bill O'Reilly, where Perry White was interviewing, he was interviewing Green Arrow, too, because there had been, like, all these casualties within the league. Like, Green Arrow had got the crap beat out of him by the Amazo robot. And what's his name? Hawkman had died too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Green Arrow is incredibly bitter about having been mostly paralyzed and very out of character for Ollie, in my opinion. Just from what... I mean, I haven't read a ton of Green Arrow, but from what I've seen of him, it's like going the full-on bitter route seemed weird to me.
Yeah, although they do comment on it. Like, they're all like, man, this is so unlike Ollie. He must have gone insane.
Well, they were like, he's being mind controlled or something, too.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it is actually shocking that Green Arrow would be that character.
Right.
I guess if Hawkman had survived and had gone that route, they would have been like, that makes sense. But,
yeah, for sure.
With Green Arrow, it's like, oh, that's weird.
Yeah. Yeah, but no, now that you say that, in hindsight, looking back at how the plot unfolds, yeah, I can see why he was acting the way he was.
And like Black Canary talks about how weird it is, but like most of the relationships are still in play in this era. Mm-hmm. But so then, we get Arkham, where Joker shows up with this weird tech. Batman goes to deal with it. Oh, and then this is actually probably the biggest thing in terms of like ongoing stuff outside of the actual climax of the issue, which is Green Lantern finds out that the planet is encased in a force field and cannot get any communication through. There's a grisly fate of Adam Strange, where he gets trapped in the force field. I don't know which way, if he was coming or going, but either way, Zeta beaming from Rand, he gets stuck in the force field and just dies in space at some point months before this all happens.
Yeah, that was pretty crazy. Like, I wasn't expecting that. Like,
what was it, months, or is it because like Green Lantern mentions that he's been back and forth between outer space and Earth a couple of times.
Yeah, so he says that that Adam Strange has been dead for 3 months and that he's been back to Oa twice in that time. So he either was allowed to pass through or the force field has gotten stronger.
Right, and he said his ring. The only reason he investigated was because his charging the ring was like getting less effective. So he was like, that's weird. There's like a power drain or something's interfering or something. So that's why he goes out into space and smashes into a force field as he's trying to fly away.
Yeah. Then we get a really cool shot where, because he can't get a signal out to the Guardians, his way of trying to contact everyone is by illuminating the force field with a giant Green Lantern symbol.
That was cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which also has a really good effect of showing how big the force field is, because it like the two frames, the images are pretty much the same sized, and then all of a sudden in the next one you've got the Green Lantern construct like filling up the edges of it, and you can see how small the Earth is.
Right, and I was fully expecting the ring to like run out of power halfway through this story, and I was a little shocked that it never did. Because I thought that's where they were going with that. It was like, oh no, he's going to run out of power in the middle of a fight or something.
Because that's how they set it up. Like, like you said, oh, my ring is losing power. I don't know how much longer it's going to last. A couple pages later, oh, it's so weak. I just can't do it. But he's still like fighting and flying around, carrying people.
Right. Like fighting Superman level threats and being okay.
But oh no, my ring. It's not going to last much longer.
Yeah, I think so not shockingly, a comic book that is about like, well, how bad are stuff if Superman's gone? He's going to spend a lot of time trying to tout the virtues of Superman. And so when you get into moments like this, Alan Davis probably just didn't want to deal with some of the like heavier hitters being in play, and like didn't want it to be like, all right, well, yes, of course, Captain Marvel could fight Superman to a standstill. So, of course, he'd be able to function as a stand-in this particular situation. A Superman analog, if you will. But so like for Green Lantern, who a lot of fans would be like, oh, but his force field should be able to block that hit or something like that. Probably just was like, I just need some dialogue to explain it so that we don't deal with it. It's the same reason why the New Gods aren't in play.
That little tangent of they go to war and that pulls the lanterns away. So yeah.
Now all of that didn't have to be on screen, by the way.
Nope.
Like I think Alan Davis just wanted to draw Darkseid, because at the end of the comic, ultimately it's just like, it's resolved. They could have just mentioned it. They didn't have to actually show it.
I was like, can we get that story though? Because that sounded pretty cool. Like the Green Lanterns and the what is it? New Eden had to team up to fight Darkseid and Apocalypse and all that. And I'm like, oh, that'd be cool. But I guess that's a story for another
That happens
time.
in part 2.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it does eventually go somewhere.
Okay.
But like, I don't know if they meant for it to go somewhere at this point. Like it doesn't feel very relevant to the plot.
No, it really doesn't. It just sounded like a cool plot in itself. So
That's a story for another time.
right.
No, I want to know about it now.
Issue 1 ends with then Joker and Batman facing off. Joker is just wiping the floor with Batman. And that's when Batgirl and Robin show up. And man, this is fucking brutal here.
Yep. This is where DC, I always am a little surprised, but I shouldn't be at this point, how dark DC is willing to go. Because, I don't know, I think with anything Superman, I always think, that bright, shiny, like, beacon of hope and more like younger skewing stuff sometimes, just because that's kind of how we kind of think of him most of the time. But then people are brutally murdered in front of Batman that are major characters. So then I'm like, oh, okay.
And like a particularly like Adam West era appropriate Batgirl and Robin,
Right. Yeah.
Like it's straight up those outfits. Like it's what people think the classic young versions of these characters look like. And it's brutal. It's so brutal. We don't find this out in this issue. In the next issue, Batman reveals that Joker, using the weird force field gauntlets, actually forced his eyelids open, so he had to watch the entire thing. He couldn't even close his eyes to look away, which is just fucking rough right there.
Because Catwoman wakes up screaming about it too.
Yeah,
she's out for a while, and he takes her back to the Batcave, and Alfred wakes her up, and she's like, "Oh my God, they were kids."
Yep.
Yeah, but so Catwoman wakes up actually while this fight's going on and while the two are being murdered brutally, and she's able to surprise Joker enough to damage the gloves, or at least free Batman so he can finish the gloves off with like what I always read as being like a crowbar, but it's actually just like scrap metal. But for whatever reason in my head, I always thought, oh, it's a crowbar like in Death in the Family.
It looked like a crowbar, because it had like the shape and everything too.
Yeah, like I said, it's only when I look at it now, I'm like, oh, it is supposed to be scrap metal, but it's definitely got that vibe.
Yeah, but now I'm free.
Now it feels like Batman is killing Joker with a crowbar instead of the other way around.
Yeah, I thought about that too. I was like, my, how the tables have turned.
Yep.
I wonder why they didn't go that route. They should have done that though. As like a good callback.
Have it actually be a crowbar.
Yeah.
This is still the time when Jason Todd was thought dead. And
should have been
everyone
a crowbar.
knew about it for the crowbar.
It should have been a crowbar.
But yeah, so Joker tries to escape. He's got like a anti-gravity kind of waistcoat, which is also like going back to Superman stuff. Like anti-grav tech was a big thing on Krypton in like Silver Age Krypton.
Yeah.
So you get all that. They escape through a skylight, and then all these news cameras catch Batman fighting the Joker in this final point where, as the fight's going on, Batman kills the Joker. And they point out that like GBS, like Perry White's news network, is like getting a perfect shot of Batman standing over the dead body of the Joker. And you're like, oh, fuck, this is not going to go well, guys.
Yeah. In the most dramatic lighting.
Yeah.
Yeah, lit by fire, but beneath him, completely cloaked in shadows himself, a silhouette and with a dead body in his hand.
I was like, during the panels with the fight, I was like, oh, he's going to beat the crap out of him. They're going to catch him in that really bad position. And I was like, oh, he's dead. He's dead.
Yeah.
Ah.
So the next issue picks up. Metropolis is even more under martial law than it was already. Like there's checkpoints and stuff, as if you're like entering or exiting the country. Like Lois Lane is like shocked because she didn't have a radio on her drive from Gotham to Metropolis, apparently. But yeah, we find out that what the news is making it sound like Batman murdered everyone in Arkham, that all the killing the Joker did. No, it's Batman. And obviously no one in the right mind would think that. It's obviously propaganda that's pushing this narrative.
Yeah, there was definitely some propaganda story arc stuff that was a little too real for modern day stuff.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff reads like it didn't feel like it was as on the pulse back when this came out in the first place, but it's like, oh yeah, no, this is very real now.
Yeah.
I mean, I was also 14 when this came out, so I don't know, like I wasn't like watching the news, so like maybe I just wasn't quite aware of it. But also I grew up in a household where Rush Limbaugh was on all the time. So, maybe it just was like, oh, yeah, it's like how the news is. but being way more unfair. I don't know.
Yeah, don't they call them? Someone calls them out for being like a propaganda machine at some point, but I can't remember who did that.
Yeah, I'm not sure which spot.
Was it? I think it was Martian Manhunter later on.
Oh yeah, that would track. He has a rough go in this one, doesn't he?
Yeah,
Yes, he does.
So issue 2, we find out that the Green Lantern Corps is being diverted to New Genesis / Apocalypse because of that war that's going on, so that they're not going to come and help, even though they know that Earth needs help.
Right.
They're like, nope, sorry. As much as Earth needs our help at the moment, a little more pressing is the literal war of gods that's going on in the heavens.
Yeah. Like, that seems like it would have worse ramifications than no Superman when all the gods are fighting out.
Yeah.
Who knows where? Like, they could be destroying planets with their battles for all we know.
Yeah, they are teleporting gods. They could be on any planet at any time they want.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and that was...
There's no front when there's a war between teleporting gods. It's
yeah. Like, well, and even this was, like, tied into what's going on, because the force field bounced back a, like, doomsday device to Apocalypse, so they think the new gods were involved. That's what stirs all this shit up in the first place.
They were about to invade Earth.
Yeah.
Right.
But I guess, it's... Some of that's kind of clever in that it gets around, like, well, why didn't this guy show up? Why didn't that guy show up? It's like, well, because it all kind of ties into what's happening with the overarching story. Which
all the cosmic heroes can't get in.
Which works perfectly for the scenario they're building on here.
So let's see. We get some interactions, like the JLA in general, to just try to like figure out what the hell's going on. We get some fun talks between Green Lantern and Martian Manhunter, where we get one of the many explanations for why Martian Manhunter has a much more alien-looking form, and then still looks like an alien when he's a superhero, as opposed to like when he was Bloodwind or something else. Like. Where it's just like, oh, I can only maintain it for so long, and it's a happy compromise, which I'm satisfied with. I feel like that works. Yeah,
that's the first time I've ever heard that before.
Right, and I think it's the best explanation I've ever heard for why he has the form that's not quite human, not quite alien, that everyone's kind of familiar with.
Yeah, like shortly after he had his own series where they were like, oh, we've got private bodies and public bodies, which I can also dig, but like you'd have to like play with the culture and sort of like explore that, which this comic is not the comic to do that.
No, not at
all. We get the dope scene of Flash checking out like all the supervillain bases. It's like every single super terrorist. Let's go check them out. And when he gets to Ra's al Ghul, they're all being murdered by Amazo. And so he steps in, and we get a really nice, brutal fight between Amazo and the Flash, where the Flash rips out his brain.
Yep, he's basically...
I should know, robot.
Yes.
Like, takes out his hard drive would be the same words there.
Yeah,
basically.
But it hits a point where, because Amazo can just mimic anybody's move, so he's like, well, I have to use my experience with these powers to beat him. But the funny part to me was that he kind of explains in a very comic booky fashion, like, I'm about to do this thing where I vibrate my molecules at the same frequency. And you're just like, why did he bother explaining this to the robot man he's about to murder?
I mean, I took it as a boast, and it does give the point for him to say, if you saw me do this more than once, you would start copying that technique too. So I need to do this now.
That makes sense.
It probably could have been a thought bubble.
Right.
Yeah. It probably would have started better to be a thought bubble.
Yeah. But that would be a John Byrne thing. John Byrne loves the thought bubble, like going deep in explanations of stuff. Alan Davis likes to have it all be part of the dialogue, because it can be flirty and sexy. Because like, doesn't Ra's al Ghul look sexy in these like shots? Like he's like open chested, like with his weird sideburns. Like Alan Davis can't draw a not pretty person. Like everyone is like, everyone's so fuckable in this book.
Even alien form John Johns.
I mean, even that is like sinewy.
I mean, I guess it depends on your taste. I'm not shaming anybody.
So we get Catwoman recovering from the trauma, Batman in a catatonic state from this all. We've got the Atom sneaking into the Thinker's lab using a slingshot, which is always fun.
Pretty cool. That was a pretty cool.
I did that. Okay, so now I'm going to have to be a hypocrite here and say that I did like how he was explaining what was going on. Because otherwise you're just like, what the hell is happening?
Yeah, especially when he gets his fingernails in like one of the cracks,
right,
and then shrinks down smaller than his fingers so he can go through that hole.
Yeah,
but in the shot you can still see his fingers there, so you're like, well, what's going on? It helps that those explanations are there. That one felt to me like being like, here's my log as I'm like,
yeah,
I've ventured down into the tiniest of sizes. I'm recording this just in case I die, but somehow this is recovered.
Yeah.
I'm too small to be heard by anyone or some shit. I don't know. But wonderful big. You know what's kind of crazy is this is a very dense 3 issues, but they also have tons of these big splash pages that are like great action shots for all these characters. Like the Flash just had the one with Amazo. The Atom gets this one here when it's fighting like the microbial defense systems. Like all the characters have these huge, like wonderful pinups in this. And usually in a comic that does that, it's like the Death of Superman, where every page is a splash page. There's not much story. It's they fight and one die, then second one die. Like that's the whole story in that issue. There's a lot that is going on here.
Yeah. I mean, the length of each issue was a little bit beefier than an average comic, though. They were like 48 to 50 pages, it looked like each. So I'm sure that helps with having the time to give the main, because there's, obviously a few that are more main characters than others within this arc, and they get a little bit more time than I thought they would. Like you were saying, like this whole sequence with the Atom was digging into like, hey, here's a guy that I don't know, maybe people aren't as familiar with, so here's how he's doing all this cool stuff and why you should think this character's cool.
Yeah, especially at this era, because this is like when he was turned into a teenage hero and was part of the Teen Titans in the main comics.
Oh, okay.
So, he was?
Yeah. He was de-aged, and so...
Oh, my God.
Man, nice guys. We'll do the recap just so that people know what we're talking about, but I have so much to talk about when this comic came out and in terms of like what status quo they're trying to present.
Okay.
Because it's so weird. We get Metamorpho trying to assassinate Perry White and Lex Luthor. And this is where we start to get the idea that Luthor's not the one behind it all. Because he's like spouting the whole thing, and then his like eyes roll back when he starts saying controlling. And at which point they reveal that there's a lab where they study aliens that's in Smallville. And we're all like, I wonder what that's the
right. Interesting.
I like that Lois remains like a big part of the story. Like her investigation honestly finds out the majority of the stuff. And it's just nice that like, it has nothing to do with if Superman was here or not. Like Lois Lane is going to find out about the story.
Yeah, that's very in character for her, which I appreciated.
We get some Aquaman stuff. Also a beautiful pinup of him doing a dragon punch to Ocean Master.
God, he just wrecked him, didn't he?
Yeah. And we find out that there's just shit going on all over the world at this point. Like weird, super advanced tech is like fucking up everything, like all over the place. Like, so that's going on. Catwoman then tries to stir Bruce out of his like catatonic stupor in the most fucked up way possible, which is dressing up as Robin and like trying to call to him. That's weird.
Yeah.
What the hell?
Yeah, I was not sure what that was about unless he just has a Robin thing, and he just needed to put this into a comic to get it out of his system. Yeah.
It's those bare legs, man. Everyone's got to be fuckable in an Alan Davis.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Green Lantern confirms that there's no hope. No one is coming from space. No transmissions are coming through. That actually makes me think, all right, so how big is this force field? Because it's got to be bigger than our like TV arrays, like all our communication satellites. So that is a very big force field right there. I wonder, it's interesting to think about.
Even with the tech presented, it seems pretty insane how massive this force field around Earth is. Yeah. It's not just like Earth up to the atmosphere, like you're saying. It's like so far beyond that it doesn't interrupt the day-to-day lives of humans, where like, even if they're getting, like you're saying, the satellites and stuff, which I didn't even think of at the time until you brought it up just now. Like, they're not interrupting satellite communication. They're not, you don't see a scene of NASA like shooting a rocket and getting bounced off of a force field or something goofy,
Yeah, but the moon is outside of it, or at least in the shot that we saw.
Yeah.
So that gives us some, I guess, some frame. It's like some like halfway to the moon or something, which is why like the JLA headquarters here is the Detroit location. As opposed to the harbor location, their first base, as opposed to the watchtower, because that would be like, oh shit, we're on the moon, everyone, we're cut off from everyone. Guess we're not doing anything in this story.
Yeah.
So Green Lantern tracks the signal to where he thinks the force field is being created.
With his depleted ring.
Yeah, with his depleted ring. Where a bomb goes off and then Major Disaster and Count Vertigo mess with his head to make everyone think that he's blasting, like, what is this, Paris? Like he's just like blasting things all around. We get another great pinup of a green boxing glove with Green Lantern. Mm-hmm. Again, just great pinups throughout this whole thing. The art, so good. Can't say enough good things about the actual pencil work of Alan Davis here. But they get nothing. Like all the guys, when he tries to interrogate them, they all they go catatonic. Mm-hmm. So there's no leads. Meanwhile, the outsiders find the Fortress of Solitude apparently still existing. Geoforce is just strong enough to like crack the door a little bit, which is there to be like, yeah, let's remember, like there are some pretty strong people out there, but they're not like Superman strong. But maybe without Superman, they come off as the strongest people on the planet. Mm-hmm. And then they get attacked by a thing and get taken out. So we don't really see much. We find out that all these superhumans, including Star Sapphire, who tried to go into hiding, we see her there. All these superhumans have been captured. They're all being experimented upon, and they're all saying that it's that they're aliens, that they're all like sleeper cells and whatnot. But as she's leaving, Lois thanks the doctor who showed her around, Dr. Lana Lang, who gives her a card like secretly as she's going to like go over to the Kent farm. Metamorpho gets assassinated. Martian Manhunter right there. And like we just find out more, like seems that people are like trying to take over, trying to use people, like mind control people to make everything worse. Basically, they're shit starters across the board. We find out that the Kent farm has become a safe haven for superheroes. So we got Ultra, the multi-alien, Beast Boy / Changeling, and Elongated Man hanging out here. And this is a good use of the Kents in that regard. Like we often debate about like when the Kents should die at like how old are the Kents supposed to be, like whatnot. And like, this is the 90s where the Kents are very much alive. And like, you know, it's the same era as the animated series, you know, like Superman can go home and see his parents like whenever he wants.
For Christmas.
Yeah. Stop by on New Year's, like right as the ball drops, like when you're in Kansas, so that they can hang out and look out at the night sky. It's very nice. But it's good use here. We see what looks kind of like Starro the Conqueror, Heat Vision, Martian Manhunter.
I bust out laughing at this scene right here, because I was like, don't tell me this is like the plot of the entire thing is that Starro is taking control of everybody.
I had the same thought. I'm like, wait, is that where this is going? Because that is not what I was expecting.
Well, so we get the teaser right before that, though, which is, you probably like, most people wouldn't focus on this one because it looks just like Superman's rocket, but on the pedestal when he walks in is the Eradicator, which I think is the unsaid part of all the actual Eradicator, like, which is a Kryptonian artificial intelligence. It looks just like Superman's rocket, but small. And that's what's like sitting right there. And it's like a little more squarish, which is why you can tell the difference. But I have thoughts about what they don't really talk about must be part of this whole thing. And then that's the end of this issue where, shit's going real bad, and not a lot of options are left at this point. And they still don't know who the bad guy is.
Yes.
So all the magic people get together, and the Spectre's like, you guys can't stop this. Like there's no magic involved here. It's science. It's science. And he's like, you're not allowed to get involved. If you try to stop anything, I'm going to intervene. So stay the fuck back. So again, just taking players off the board
right
throughout this whole thing. Wonder Woman goes to the White House to chat, and she dejectedly leaves, being like, I have failed at my mission of bringing peace. And as she's leaving, the White House is bombed.
Right. Just like vaporized almost.
Right.
Not fully, but it's a pretty big explosion.
That scene from Independence Day.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly. That's why it looked familiar.
I wonder if you match up the frames, like, could you see some of like the particulate or anything? Like, was he like referencing it? Like, does it blow out up in the same like blast pattern on the pillars and stuff?
Right.
I mean, I'm not saying that Alan Davis Tracy's like, he's too good an artist to make that accusation, but I am curious if he used a reference.
Yeah.
But so Wonder Woman's attacked by the Metal Men, who don't seem to know her. They look like they've been reprogrammed completely. Again, fucking amazing pinup of Wonder Woman like kicking Platinum like right across the neck, and it's like, cool, all right.
Yeah, one of the cooler fights I thought was her fighting all the metal men in this one, because she's also doing the Wonder Woman thing of like trying to calm them down and talk to them as she's fighting them, but obviously it's not going to work because there's sinister things afoot.
Yeah. And this is where most of her dialogue makes sense, because she is trying to calm them down. Like when Lead starts firing off bullets, which is a really cool power that I didn't know he had before I read this comic in the 90s. I was like, oh, that makes sense. Like, yeah, bullet, like he's made of lead. All right, cool. She's deflecting them and they're hitting the allies. And she's like, I can deflect all of your shots, but like I can't control where the ricochet's going right now. So he's like destroying everyone else. And that's when Wonder Woman gets decked by what we're led to believe is a robot, but with a number 1 on his chest. They've got these new robots that Lex Luthor rolls out called the Liberators, which are supposed to be like super fighting things to stop aliens, apparently.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing they keep harping on, is like all metahumans are aliens and therefore they're all enemies of Earth. That's kind of what the baddies are trying to push, that narrative.
We get Hawkwoman deciding to leave Earth. Which I'm like, how effective is that going to be?
Right.
Like she should have, like, if they wanted to actually like make you think that was possible, she should have left like at the very beginning of the first issue.
Yeah.
And then like once she left, that's when the force field went up or something. But nope, not the case here. So she gets up to her ship and then sees a fire and goes to save them. Again, glorious pinup. This one actually is truly without words. And it's just her like with fire like coming off of her wings as she saves children. Such good stuff. The cops try to arrest her because she's quote unquote an alien. And actually, when I say quote unquote, she actually is.
Right.
Yeah, she's a Thanagarian.
But all the people from the town are like, you can't do that. But then another one of these like super robots shows up and knocks her out.
That scene from Spider-Man where he's on the bridge. You're like, you're gonna fight one of us. You're gonna fight all of us.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was cool to see. I thought the like citizen on the street is not necessarily buying into all this propaganda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're just like, no, we like our superheroes that have been like helping mankind over the last couple of decades.
Yeah. We get Batman researching more, seeing that all of his friends have been captured. And this is where he drops the name Kryptonian, which I think is for the first time in the series.
Yeah.
Apparently they have information from Hawkman and like from like Thanagarian computers. Catwoman's trying to like work with him. And then there's an awkward kiss here that I can't imagine. I don't know what's going on with this shot here. So when they finally like decide to kiss and like Alfred walks off smirking as he is like, Master Bruce about to get his knob worked. The kiss they do looks just like the kiss from The Authority when they wouldn't allow Midnighter and Apollo to kiss mouth to mouth. And so he had to like kiss his cheek. And it looks like that here, but like, why? Like, I can't like, did DC editorial just say like, well, Batman can't like explicitly fuck, like a stance that obviously they changed very shortly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But because like, I just don't get it. Like, why not just like kiss on the lips? Like that seems way more dramatic than whatever. Is he just nibbling on her ear? Like what's going on in this?
I just assumed it was drawn a little weird. I don't know.
Yeah. Or maybe you're supposed to be more going for the neck or something. I
don't know.
I don't know, but it's also the first thing. Like, who starts with the neck?
Right? The Alfred getting a little too into it was the most off-putting part about it, though.
Because he was standing right next to them when it started. Like, he's right there, and he, like, walks away where it's like, oh, they're about to do it.
Yep.
I'll just leave these guys here for now.
Yep.
So Green Lantern storms the main base and engages with all of these quote-unquote robots. But as he's getting knocked out, his ring scans them and reveals that they're all Bizarros. This one is one of my favorite things in comics, frankly. This is a perfect convergence of when and where the book was. Like, it was 90s. It was an Elseworld. They could do all this stuff. But it was taking such a thing, like a long-standing kind of trope, and then figuring out how you could better either weaponize or utilize in a different way the kind of scene, akin to like in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, when they're like, well, we have minds, we have replicators, and we have cloaking technology. What if we made a mind that self-replicates and can cloak? And like being like, all right, how do you put the pieces of all the MacGuffins that you have out there? How do you put them together in more interesting and like threatening ways? I think is really fun. And like, this is the era of Bizarro being a clone of Superman, not just like a duplicate or like a weird magic construct like he would be shortly after, but like the Luthor style failed clone of Kal-El that is like kind of artificial, but also kind of like it's a weird process, but it's like it was a thing about 90s Bizarro specifically that you could have that sort of setup. And I love the look of it where it's got like the Brainiac 3 dots. So it's like, like, did they incorporate Brainiac technology into what they're working with at this point? Who knows? But where like they have mind control drones that are all Bizarros, and that's so fucking cool.
It's gonna reiterate that he's still fighting with a depleted power ring.
Yes, well, but that's why they're able to punch through his force fields.
Yeah. Also, like there's a consistent trope of him getting his arm broken when he fights, like later on.
That's true. Like Mongol also does that to him. Yeah, I mean it's Hal Jordan. Like I guess they just like to break his arm every now and then. He owed a lot of people money at various points.
Yeah. I mean, I did like even the punching through the force field. It wasn't even that it penetrated the force field though, but it like squished the force field into his arm with such impact that that's what broke his arm. And even he was just like, wow, that's pretty crazy. Nobody can usually do this.
Right. But one thing I also love is that the first one of these Liberators that we see had a 1 token. Like they all have a number badge on their front. And so the fact that it's a 1 is like a subtle hint that it's Bizarro number 1, which I also just fucking adore. Again, I also really like the Liberator costume. Like I know it's very simple, but like that red V design on like an all blue bodysuit, I think looks really good.
Yeah, like I didn't expect them to not be robots until this scene.
Yeah. We get Lois pulling a gun on Jimmy to force him to bring her upstairs. We get revealed their version of Crypto, which is the Starro the Conqueror looking
that
thing.
Was a choice.
Yeah, and then we find out that Jimmy's actually the Kryptonian, which was not something I saw coming when I first was reading this.
I fully expected it to be
Luthor?
Luthor at first, and then when you're like, oh, it's not him, that's weird. And then you see the fake Starro and you're like, okay. So the breadcrumbs did a good job of tricking me, I guess, into
lots of red herrings. Like it makes sense when you go back and look at the interview with Jimmy at the beginning of the first issue. You're like, oh yeah, I feel what I see what he's doing here. Like they set up all of the superpowered stuff to like set up further stuff down the road. Most of his conversations, he's always there with someone who is talking to the press who is being mind controlled. So it works pretty well. Flash and Adam show up. Batman and Catwoman show up. They're all fighting the various Liberators. We find out that Crypto was a failed attempt at bonding Kryptonian DNA to a dog, and that it was the last of the many ones that they tried to die, except for Jimmy, who transforms into the exact Kryptonian man outfit that Superman had when he was controlled by the Eradicator. So I think some of that's going on here, like that. Specifically, like this Kryptonian intellect is like overriding and pushing all this stuff, whether or not it came from the Eradicator proper. Again, there's references to Brainiac. So like some Superman stuff has happened in the background that we just haven't seen. So I don't know where those all come together. But either way, like Jimmy is now pulling the strings with the power of Superman.
Yeah, that was a good twist, I thought. Like, especially because he had the very much the what's his name from Incredibles, the villain in that Syndrome,
yeah,
where he's because at the beginning of he's like, yeah, I used to be Elasta Lad or whatever. He had like several different monikers where he's had various powers that I'm assuming is more Gold and Silver Age references.
The Turtle Boy stuff is some big Silver Age energy right there.
Exactly. And then when it comes back around and you find out he's the big bad, he very much does that. Like, you never accepted me because I wasn't one of you guys. I was just a human and blah, blah, blah. So like, they're all like, no, you were our friend. What are you talking about? But he always felt disrespected. And I'm wondering if that's, like you were saying, like Eradicator influence taking over his mind, because he does seem very unhinged at this point.
Yeah. Who can say? Because he's also apparently breaking down still. We get the fight with the JLA is like now the collected JLA, having freed most of the other metahumans, are facing off against all these Bizarros, the Liberators. And they note that they're breaking down, which is also, again, a part of like 90s Bizarro. Like those Bizarros were all single use. They would die by the end of the story characters whose bodies just couldn't maintain consistency over time. So again, it works here in a way that it wouldn't have worked either in the 60s or more recently, because those Bizarros don't die after one use, and so they would be too powerful to actually face in any of those fights. Like you need them to be putty patrol, but really, really strong ones.
Yes.
the Lord Zed style.
Because they start to turn to dust after battling, so it doesn't even matter if they're winning. Eventually, they just kind of burn out.
Yeah.
I think the Flash was like they're only made to like fight up against normal people, not actual metahumans, because they can't stand up to the Force.
Yeah, and they probably aren't that capable of tactics, really. Like we don't see anything that really indicates that they're that smart. They're being controlled, but like they're probably not even as good as like a Mazo in a fight. Like we see nothing to indicate that they know what they're doing beyond just like being told to do stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. It's really fun. There's one point where the Flash like mentions that he's faster than the speeding bullet, which is really nice.
Yeah.
And it's like a page before they all face off against Jimmy, and like Jimmy like shocks the Flash by like catching him by the throat. And he's like, shit, I did not think anyone was like gonna be moving that fast. But this like fight in Smallville, Kansas, which is not going well for them, ends with them crashing into an Amish farm, which I like. This is where we get at the reveal about where Kal-El went. So the rocket was recovered. There was cellular data there, like there were skin cells and so forth that they could use to make the Bizarros, to make Jimmy into this test subject, like Kryptonian hybrid. But the baby wasn't there. The baby had been taken, and we find out that he's actually in a Mennonite community. And Amish bearded Superman is the best thing ever.
And like it explains everything away, because it's like, well, he was Amish, so like they didn't have technology, they weren't watching the news, they just kind of did their own thing, and you know, he was treated like one of their own because that's just their society.
So
they accepted him into their society. He was a good worker. He cared about his spiritual life. I'm curious about his Rumspringa as Superboy.
Right. I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, did he not take one, or?
But regardless, Jimmy heat visions him, and then they do the worst of all travesties, which is that it burns off his shirt, his hat, and his beard, but not his hair. Like then he just looks like 90s Superman with a mullet. Yeah. And while it's a great looking 90s Superman, like he is, like, again, because it's an Alan Davis art piece, a sexy motherfucker here. Mm-hmm. I wanted that goddamn beard.
Yep,
it's so hilarious. Like everything burns off, but the freaking beard. Why?
I would have bought it if the back half of the hat, like the area like protected by his skull or something, hadn't burned away, or
singed hair or something. But like,
yeah, yeah, but no, it's just he just looks like Superman now. He goes over, he talks to Batman, who's just been beaten to a bloody pulp. And it's just like, if you have the power to do something, fucking do it, please.
Yes.
We're dying out here.
And he goes and he like consults his parents, and like Jimmy's like, what the fuck are you doing talking to these humans? And he murders Clark's parents, this nice elderly Amish couple who like, yeah. So murdering Superman's parents was not the way to get him on your side. And so they engage in a fight. And as good a graft as the Kryptonian physiology on Jimmy is, it's not enough to put up with the real deal. So again, beautiful splash pages of this whole thing. The fight's so big, and I got real like Kid Miracle Man vibes because there's like lightning coming off of them as the like friction of their body burns up the atmosphere around them because it's a huge fight, and like shockwaves are causing storms, basically like gusts of wind are knocking people off the road and stuff. Like it's crazy what this battle does. And then Jimmy burns out, and the Kents show up and like take Clark in, which I'm like, that's cute. It's a little on the nose.
Yeah. But
it's cute.
That's why they showed that they were good people who took in, superheroes who were on the run.
Yeah.
So like it made sense in that they were setting it up. At least it wasn't completely out of nowhere where they were just like, oh, we just happened to be driving by in our truck and we found this guy,
This 30-year-old half naked man. And we're going to take him in.
And then he goes off, and like we find out that like they fix up most of the things, and he becomes Superman and is like now the new flagship character of the Justice League, which is like, all right, yep, that makes as much sense as anything. I don't know if he would wear that costume or call himself Superman in this world. Like I think he would just call himself Kal-El, reveal, or if he has to hide that he's an alien. I don't know. Superman is I went on this rant online the other night. Superman is a descriptor for the character. Like the earliest stuff was like, Superman did this, or only like it must be that Superman we're hearing about, because the whole idea was that no one has superpowers. This is the really crazy thing, that there is a Superman in existence. Once you're in a world with tons of superheroes, like, would you pick that? And would people let you get away with calling yourself that?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious about that as well, because it did seem a little like, okay, we got to get back to some sort of status quo at the end of this for some reason, which I guess, but like, it's an Elseworlds. You don't have to get back to the status quo at the end of this. You can call him something completely different.
Yeah, so that's the nail. And it's like, I think, again, the art's great. I think that it reads better now that some of the Easter eggs that were in there for people reading at the time are a little bit more obscured, because it's like I said, the Kryptonian stuff like has some more distance here. Like they're not telegraphing it quite as much. And some of the things that are in here that felt wrong at the time are not wrong anymore. Like a lot of the teams, a lot of the configurations for groups, those are all now more status quo than at the time in the 90s, because this book comes out in 98. It comes out at about the same time as the Grant Morrison JLA run. And it has the 90s status quo of DC Comics kind of going for it, but Alan Davis also clearly just picked and chose what he liked. So like the Krypton stuff looks like 90s Krypton, but then like it's like the 70s versions of the Outsiders, and like the Doom Patrol's like the 60s version there. A lot of the players are pretty like young in this whole pantheon of stuff all over the place. I feel like it's just like this weird mishmash, and the 90s had like weird concerns about that. Like everyone had updated costumes and they were like, no, this is the continuity now, and so forth. So at the time it felt very incongruous to what DC was doing, but now in a world where everything is canon, it doesn't feel weird anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I didn't feel, none of that took me out of it at all. Like the more obscure characters, I was just like, okay, I accept that this is a character in the DC universe. Why not?
Yeah.
It was like, oh, this person's here too. Like I was telling you, like I was like, oh, Dr. Fate's here. That's awesome. Oh, Etrigan's here too. This is amazing. Like, oh,
look at this team anything? Up of people not allowed to do anything.
Yeah, they're not doing anything. Oh, that sucks.
Yeah. They always got to take the magic users off the table in these, I feel like.
So the reason I wanted to talk about this book, obviously, is that even though it's a book where Superman only shows up in like the last like 5 pages, it's all about the lack of Superman and what that does here. Mm-hmm. And I think that it clearly has an idea that I think is really interesting. Like, well, what if you don't have this like bright figure, and how is it going to change? I think that it suffers by virtue of being set in this like post-crisis world where you had the mystery men of the 40s, because at that point, like you had fucking Alan Scott Green Lantern, and you had the Spectre, you had like lots of crazy powerful people out there, and you had lots of like really inspirational people out there. There have been lots of superheroes. Like Superman's like not that unique at this point. Like I feel like this would have worked better if it was like Silver Age Earth 1, where like Superman is still the first superhero, so that like he could have been like more revolutionary at his time, and like as a result other people didn't have him to follow, and so you could have had like, yeah, the Flash just tried to be secretive for a little bit longer than he needed to be, and so people were kind of scared about this like random red blur that was doing stuff in Central City or things like that. Like I feel that the timeline, by virtue of having all these existing characters, having such a rich world to live in, makes Superman's absence feel like less important. But from a thematic standpoint, it's super important. So, pardon the pun. Like, it's just like, how did that come off to you guys?
I agree. Like, it kind of sets up how important he is for things not to fall into complete chaos. Somebody like they need that. Even the Justice League needs that symbol to look up to a lot of times, because like what happened at the beginning of the book, everyone was kind of like, well, we can't trust each other because we all have our different motives and things when I do. They didn't have that one person there to like keep them on the straight and narrow.
I think the reason it kind of worked for me in this take on it was because it still involved Superman's homeworld and technology. Like the Kryptonian stuff was still like the catalyst for everything else that happens. Whereas I went into it thinking it would be, if there's no Superman, maybe it like there'd be nothing with that, and where would we go from there? And that would be, I think, a very, very different book, because
like if Krypton never blew up or something kind of thing.
Yeah, just it's like, why wasn't there a Superman? Because whatever plot thing you need to do. But having the technology still show up definitely made this grounded as it is a Superman story, even if he's only in the last 5 pages, because Krypton. So,
yeah.
Also, they never reference Supergirl, which I also think was interesting because would this be the era where she was still like a goo person?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so they weren't. So that kind of took her off the table regardless. But the other thing when I was like looking at it was I realized like, oh God, it's only 24 years after the flat tire incident. And so we're talking like it's a very early Superman still. Like even like 24-year-old Superman. Like that's a lot of superheroes out there. Like all these teams like.
Oh yeah, that's true.
In existence. I'm like, shit, how young did Davis think that Superman got started being the first hero for everyone else to follow and have like, I mean, this is Bronze Age level, like number of characters out there.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy how many characters they pulled into the story, taking that into account. But yeah. I think overall, I mean, as its own standalone thing, it did work for me just because it was, I don't know, I guess a fun way to bring in and reference all these like more obscure characters that Alan Davis clearly loves these characters because anytime he does these Elseworld or anything, he loves to bring them in. It seems like ones that the average person on the street is probably not going to know who, the various android characters are, or, like the alien who's made of multiple aliens that I did not know who that was when I read this.
Yeah. He was shot by 4 different aliens fired a beam that made whoever they hit into a perfect replica of themselves, but also a slave. And he was hit by 4 simultaneously, which is why, despite being born a human, he has 1/4 of his body is each a different alien.
Wow.
Thing. Okay. Yeah, it's comics, man.
Yeah, that's wild.
I was like, Doom Patrol. I was not expecting Doom Patrol.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they doesn't go well for them though. Robot gets melted at one point. Like, did he survive that? I was unclear.
I mean, I think they show up at the end sprawl where everyone's like staying together. I think they're there.
Yeah, and it was just his arms and legs that were dissolved.
That's true.
And honestly, like with Robot Man, he would have been like, "Oh, thank God."
Yes, please kill me. Thank you. Yeah.
my suffering is ended. Boy.
Yeah, we're not doing part 2, right? No part 2?
We don't have any plans at this time to do part 2. But also it changes it from being again, this is a Superman story dictated both by the impact or the things he held at bay, such as the Kryptonian technology and like what supervillains and heroes and so forth he wasn't around to deal with. And then by virtue of him showing up and like reminding us of how important he is. Like the Nail 2 is less of a Superman story. So I don't think it's even really dealing with that archetype so much. It's just another adventure set in this world that gets a bit more cosmic.
I mean, but it does have the dark side Highfather War.
Right.
So that does sound kind of cool.
Yeah, so maybe if we're doing like a fourth world thing, we might talk about it. But it was a lot of fun, like looking back at this. Like I said, the art really caught me as really being like pleasurable to view. I think modern coloring works really well for it. I remember it being on glossy paper, and so I don't think they recolored it for the digital release, which is what I'm looking at right now. But like you can see, it's late 90s, so like they've figured out how to do at least like gradients and stuff like that in terms of digital coloring. It looks really good. It looks really polished.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it definitely looked very good. Like that was the other reason I didn't realize what era it was from at first, was because it did have a more modern look reading the digital version. Just like, oh yeah, I can jump right in because like these character designs are like, obviously I've seen them all before. And who's to say that they didn't just grab the versions that the artist enjoys drawing? So,
well, I mean, that's definitely what happened here.
Yep,
like,
exactly.
For all these characters.
Yep, for sure. But yeah, I did enjoy it though. I will say, like, despite how weird it is, and well, Case, you know me, I'm a sucker for any kind of like alt history or crossover or anything that like breaks the mold a little bit. It's kind of my jam. So. So I did find this one pretty enjoyable.
Yeah, it's fun. I don't want to be like too harsh on parts of it because like 90s DC continuity, while considered sacrosanct at the time, in retrospect was gobbledygook. So I don't want to be like too loving about that. But it is interesting because like in terms of doing that alt history, sometimes you need that tight continuity to be like, okay, it's changed. So how like this is not doing those dominoes that we were talking about with like a what if, which usually the fun was like, how do we, if this one thing occurs, what are the ramifications of all these other things? Like there's a little bit of that, but it's more just the thematic component of like Superman means so much as like a property, and in universe he does so much. So like really kind of like exploring the world created by his absence, even if it's not the events that are a result of his absence, if that makes any sense.
It makes a lot of sense.
But were there any big things that like jumped out at you guys? Like, I feel like I've talked a lot, but I also read this when it came out and liked it a lot. And I was the one who wanted to talk about it. So like, what jumped out at you guys?
I would have liked to see Starro be the main villain. That was one point. They teased us with that scene. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's happening. And then it was just Crypto. And I was like, ugh.
Jimmy Olsen fires off his heat beams and he opens up his shirt to reveal Starro like attached to him.
I mean, like you see like the five arms. You're like, oh crap, this is happening.
Yeah. Well, the five arms and then like the big eye on like the warped face of Crypto. So and when, like, it's definitely supposed to look like Starro.
And then you see like people have been mind controlled, and I was like, is this what's happening? And then nope.
I thought with the Starro thing, they would have at least had Jimmy having used Starro, like a captured Starro, to control everyone else. So I was like, well, that seems like a missed opportunity to not tie him in,
Yeah.
They never really explained how like Lex got mind controlled either.
Yeah, I mean, I think the argument is that Jimmy has figured out a lot of Kryptonian technology, and he's utilizing.
Well, they kind of said that Lex was the one who was in charge of doing all that stuff, and then Jimmy just kind of like took over at one point.
I mean, if you had super speed, you could probably take over pretty easily in that scenario. I'm just surprised that like they didn't monitor Jimmy better and like allow for him to do these kind of things.
Yeah, because you think after you experiment on somebody, you'd like keep tabs on that person or watch them constantly to make sure nothing like this would happen.
Yeah, must have been a quick turn from Jimmy Olsen, goofball sidekick, to mass murderer.
Yeah, I still am not fully clear on why they have a Fortress of Solitude that looks like a Fortress of Solitude. If it's a base of some kind, I don't get it. Like, I don't know what's going on. And that is why I think it has to be the Eradicator, because 90s Eradicator created that Fortress of Solitude. But it doesn't have the door. Like that door, the reason why the giant door with the keyhole worked for that era was because those arrows were real things. Like they're still out there in the world as like navigation arrows for like our spy planes. This is a big one, but for planes in general. And like it was like, oh, it's secretly a key that I can pick up and use to unlock my giant door. It was just the goofy Superman shit that they love to do, and like is why you're there. You're like, oh yeah, Superman's doing a thing that we do, but like it's bigger, like and it's playing on a real thing. I don't know why you would do that door in the 90s unless you're just trying to make it look like 60s Superman.
Right. I also was expecting the reveal of Superman to be that
the bad guy
was not the bad guy, but like somehow when someone else had found him that wasn't Amish, and like I was expecting him to show up in a test tube, basically, like. And that's how they were making Bizarro clones and all that stuff. So the fact that he was just chilling off somewhere, like on a farm, hanging out, I'm like, that's interesting. Like with his super hearing, and he kind of is like, yeah, I hear all these people in distress. I'm like, shouldn't you be helping them then, or what?
He's got to be churning lots of butter. Raised a barn on Monday, soon I'll raise another.
You got me there.
His Amish dad was totally Jonathan kidding him from Man of Steel. No, son, you can't get involved. No. This is not our fight. You shouldn't reveal yourself to these people.
God, picture Henry Cavill in like the Amish beard now. Like, listeners, you need to pick up this book. It's on DC Infinite, so you don't actually need to buy it. But like, go just look at some of the splash pages, but especially check out Superman with Amish beard. It is like everything I always needed.
Get to the last few pages, and you'll be very happy.
Yeah. All right. Well, so if you guys don't have any other big takeaways, like I think this was like a really fun book. Again, amazing pinups throughout the whole thing. like, I'd say it kind of holds up better now in this age of disinformation than I expected it to. Like, it, it's obviously not dealing, like, Lois at one point says that the radio's out in her car, like, and so she doesn't know about alerts. And I'm like, well, nowadays she would have a cell phone that has like an RSS feed that pings everything. Like, oh, new thing popped up, new problem popped up. She would be super aware. Like, the idea that you could be disconnected from information seems so alien to us now. Like, I can't even imagine it. But, aside from some like quirks of just when it was released, I think it works really well. Like, again, the art looks great. The coloring looks very modern and it's not overdone. Like, a big issue of like early 2000s coloring is oftentimes that they go crazy on having like gradients and everything all over it. And I feel like it's restrained. Like, it's there. I end up feeling that the colors are restrained appropriately, but taking advantage of the technology without, like I said, going too far. You get nice flat colors where it is appropriate. Like, the Flash oftentimes is like, his suit is a solid red, but then his after image has like this like trailing effect of like reds to yellows and so forth. And I think that's all really appropriate. And like, it just shows the strength that like a really talented artist and in the era, like, this is 1998, like, Davis was like, he was on the original Miracle Man run. So that was like 81, 82. He's a 20-year vet at this point, has done tons of huge stories, and he's still working now. But like, this is well after he did his crazy run on Excalibur, where if you want to talk about weird, obscure characters, talk about alternate reality versions of weird, obscure characters all over the place. All that crazy stuff with Excalibur and the Captain Britain Corps. But, like I said, just like a veteran of the field, like, doing a fun story. And, very clearly he said, I don't give a shit about what your modern continuity is. I just want to do a fun story. And they let him do a fun story. And I think it works really well.
I think people should do that more often, though. Just have fun writing a story and see what all you can put in there. Make it cohesive, make it fun, make it exciting. Elseworlds stuff. Also, did they ever mention how Green Lantern got his ring back to working again?
I mean, I assume the force field came down. I mean, the Green Lantern Corps showed up after everything and was like, hey, we're here now. You missed a cool fight.
Yeah, that's true. At the end, like, he gets knocked out. He doesn't get, like, his ring doesn't power down when the Bizarro takes him. So I think it just, once he woke up, he was able to...
It was just, like, so faint the entire story,
Well, that's why he doesn't have a force field around him in the last fight. He just has it creating the sling for his broken arm, and he has energy blast coming off. Like, he's actually undefended because his power is so drained at this point.
Yeah, but he had to like help Batman fight Jimmy though. So I'm like, how did he do that if his power was so drained?
I know.
So drained the entire story.
I feel like having gone to like a drugstore and bought a sling might have been more better use of his power than using part of it to make a sling out of his, his willpower.
I wonder. So this is the era of Kyle Rayner, which is where they first introduced the battery concept for the ring. Like, not the idea of a battery to charge off of, but where the ring would run out of power based on the use. Prior to that point, it was always a 24-hour cycle. So maybe it's just that like the charge he's getting is weaker, but it doesn't like change the amount he does anything with, if that makes any sense, which... Man, that'd be awesome if that's how like phones worked or something, where like doesn't matter how much you use it, it's all, like you just have to recharge it once every day.
Right. Huh. Yeah, I don't know.
By saying an oath.
Yeah, they didn't quite dig into that part of it, but it was kind of not the point, I guess.
Yeah. No, they don't go deep on anything on this one. Yeah. Like it's a lot of like fun surface stuff, and like probably the most they go into is the Superman stuff, just by virtue of it being like the ultimate murder mystery that's going on is Kryptonian related, but. Because it's not like we go into great detail about like, well, what happened to Jason Todd in this timeline, guys? Like,
right.
Like not concerned about any of that. So I had a challenge that I wanted to ask you guys about. So the episode art that we do, I usually pick like a super manly figure for what we're talking about and put them in the central Pentagon that's coming out or like emerging from the Pentagon with issues behind it. And I don't know which one to use here. Like, there's a part of me that just wants to have it be empty. As a joke. There's a part of me that wants to put Amish Superman.
Of course.
There's a part that wants me to put one of the Liberators or Jimmy Olsen in those spots. But all of those are twists, like those are all reveals. Like the Liberators would be the least of one. Or we do the joke of just having no one in there and just like make it very clear that there's like stuff going on in the background.
Yes, or just the nail from that first
the nail,
shot that's coming out of the... because there's a couple of close-up. There's at least the one at the end, right?
Yeah.
In the big splash page at the end that has the Justice League, like, with 90s Superman now in the middle, and then at the front there's just, like, the broken barn.
Right.
And, like, from his Amish parents, and there's the one big crooked nail coming out. That's your hero.
The hero of the story, the nail. Where is he the villain?
Well,
that insidious nail.
Still can't believe Jimmy, Uncle Owen and Aunt Berude, his parents. I was not expecting that.
That was definitely a 90s flavor right there.
Yeah.
Of like, just let's introduce these characters to murder them in front of the hero.
And they seemed so nice.
Right? They're like, now son, you got to make your own decision. And now we're dead.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so we'll think about it. We might end up going with the nail. We might end up going with the joke and having it just be empty for once. I mean, because that is the idea of the story. So,
Yeah, fair enough.
I don't know, but I wanted to poll you guys, and I thought it might be a worthwhile question. At the very least, it will explain whatever we resolve to do for if someone looks at the episode art and like, did they forget something?
Or you'd have a barn.
Or I just like have the really horny shot of Jonathan and Martha.
Well, that's an option.
Yeah. Jonah, thank you for coming on. This was great chatting with you.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. It was a good choice for the book too, because it was pretty interesting and entertaining and very of the era.
Yeah. So tell people where they can find you, follow you, all the pluggy stuff.
So you can follow my personal Twitter is @ArealJonah. Inks and Issues is the one for the podcast. And you can find us on Geekly Inc., geeklyinc.com. And we have all our episodes on there. So check those out. If there's any particular, like, you don't have to have a certain starting point. Just, like, look through the back catalog. And if something is a book that sounds interesting, try that episode. That's what I say. Our most popular one is actually the Naruto 3-part that we did with the one of the co-hosts of now Naruto Reviewed, where they go through every episode of Naruto. But at the time, they were just doing a general anime podcast. So that was a really fun set of episodes because Naruto is actually a pretty fun comic, like, to go back and look at. Like, it's surprisingly still pretty good.
Yeah, and strong fandom, so lots to...
Yeah, for sure.
Lots to reference.
Yeah, definitely. But that's pretty much it. That's what I got going on.
Awesome. Well, again, people should definitely go check out the podcast, check out some of the back episodes, and can't wait for the next one to actually drop.
Yeah, thank you. Should be coming soon.
Jmike, where can people find you and follow you?
I mean, I don't know if they want to follow me, but you can find me on Twitter at Jmike101. Do some jokes, do some memes. I don't do much, but I try.
Yeah, I mean, as I always say, your GIF game is good. You can find me on Twitter at Case Aiken. You can find the show on Twitter at Men of Steel Pod, because I am a dum-dum, and I don't know how I went so long without knowing you could change the actual username and not just the display name. And so for the longest time, I just had 14 arbitrarily pinned on at the end for reasons that I was angry about. And then Matt texted me the other day being like, hey, I've noticed, like, every episode you make this joke. You know you can change it, right? I was like, oh, no, I didn't. Fuck. So now I got to go back and change, like, the links for a lot of stuff. But it's now Men of Steel Pod, so it doesn't seem like a crazy person anymore.
Hi, my name is Random Name Bunch of Numbers, and I'm here with some terrible opinions.
I know. I was always worried about that, especially because it's Men of Steel, and, like, the Snyder Bros have gotten so bad at this point.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, when we picked it, like, the Snyder Cut was like kind of like, oh yeah, that's funny, and that was it. Like,
yeah.
And it, and it's the nickname for Superman, so it made sense. But with just like random numbers at the end, it felt particularly like, opinions, which we have, but we generally are trying not to be controversial with our opinions.
Define controversial.
Fair enough. I have made comparisons between Batman and the Ku Klux Klan.
I mean, we did come out with a 4-hour show against the Snyder Cut, so I'd say that's pretty controversial too.
That's true. That's true. Well, yeah. Anyway, so find the show at either on Twitter at Men of Steel Pod or over at certainpov.com, where you can find links to more episodes of this show and tons of other great shows. I mentioned Matt, so I'll reference one of the shows that he works on, Screen Snark, which is a wonderful conversation show between Matt Storm, Rachel Quirky Shank, and then a guest, and they just talk about the media that they've been consuming recently, and then use that as a jumping off point to talk about like how things are, like what's going on in their guests' lives. It's a really fun show that uses the ability to talk about art as a way of lowering the barriers and sort of feeling comfortable having bigger conversations about life. So that's a great one to check out. So go check out that. But we'll be back in 2 weeks. And until then, stay super, man.
Men of Steel is a certain POV production. Our hosts are Jmike Folsom and Case Aiken. The show is edited by Matt Storm. Our logo is by Chris Batista. Episode art is by Case Aiken. And our theme is by Jeff Moon.
Actually, our editor was on an episode today, and he mentioned that like sometimes just people's audios will get off sync, and he has no idea where it occurs. So,
yeah. I've definitely seen that when I was editing the show myself. That's why I also have an editor, because it was too time consuming. Editing is just a whole beast of its own.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, like Men of Steel, we always were explicitly like a little bit freer on, but like Another Pass, I usually like there's so much chance for like crosstalk or like overtalk that like I always want to like fix that up. And then like Nerf Herders was always like 10 minutes for every minute, like editing.
Oh yeah,
like having sound effects, having so many people on it. And
that is honestly the reason I've never started a Real Play podcast, because I'm like, I don't know if I can afford the editor I would need for this. And I definitely don't have the time.
It would take me like weeks to get through an episode.
Yeah, I believe it.
Which I could maintain on a bi-weekly pace for a little while, but like I need to get that started again, but I am not ready emotionally.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
Hey there, Screen Beans. Have you heard about Screen Snark?
Rachel, this is an ad break. They aren't screen beans until they listen to the show.
Fine. Potential screen beans. You like movies and TV shows, right?
I mean, who doesn't? Screen Snark is a casual conversation about the movies and television shows that are shaping us as we live our everyday lives.
That's right, Matt. We have a chat with at least one incredible guest every episode, hailing from all walks. We've interviewed chefs,
writers, costumers, musicians,
yoga teachers, comedians, burlesque dancers,
folks in the film and TV industry,
and more.
We'd be delighted for you to join us every other Monday on the Certain POV Podcast Network.
Or wherever you get your podcasts, fresh and tasty off the presses.
What? That's not...
Can I call them screen beans now?
Fine.
Screen beans.
So tune in and we'll see you at the movies or on a couch somewhere.
'Cause you're all screen beans now.
She will be mine.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.